Dave from the Boulder Archive coming at you. So today we're going to talk about a subject I think everybody's kind of been waiting for, the UK comics. So we've looked at the US M.A.S.K comics in our prior videos. We've looked at the mini comics that came with the toys, the promo comic, the preview issue for the DC run, the 4-issue DC series, and then the 9-issue regular DC series. So we've looked at quite a few comics already, and I think some of you are probably thinking that, well, he's about done. No. We are nowhere near done. So today we're going to talk about the UK run of the M.A.S.K series. I'm aware that there is an Eagle run and there is some special issues. Those are going to be subjects for later videos, so I'm well aware of them. I know of them. We will discuss them. But for today, we're just going to look at the main UK series run. And what can I say about these books? That there's a lot of them. There is so much material here. There is no possible way I could cover them. I could do 12 videos on the UK series, and I don't think I would even come close to covering everything in these issues. So, there's a ton about these comics out there. I would like to give a shout out to Scott Crawford, who's helped me a little bit with getting some of my research on the UK comics. He runs the M.A.S.K comic blog. I would highly recommend you guys go check him out. He's doing some really great videos on YouTube as well. So definitely check him out online, M.A.S.K comic blog. Scott's a great guy. Like Social Out Trivia contest on Facebook. The M.A.S.K pub quiz. It's really, he's done a lot to help the community, and he's also helped me a lot personally with kind of doing a lot of my research into the UK comic run. He's native to the UK. As you guys can tell, I'm in the US, so it's generally it's been a lot for me to learn about these comics. And I'm going to kind of come at it from a different perspective. If you're in the UK, a lot of this probably will seem really basic to you, but I'm kind of looking at this as perspective of somebody in the United States. And I think a lot of people who are watching this video are in the United States, and they don't really know a lot about these comics. So this is kind of who this video is geared towards. I will cover some of this material in greater detail in later videos. I will cover some of the storylines and kind of do a lot deeper of a dive into some of this material more so. But for today, I just kind of want to give the basic overview and what kind of you're getting into when you collect them, what to look for when you're buying them, how to kind of even start. So my start with UK comics was, I basically had lived with M.A.S.K for a long time. I loved the cartoon, I read the US comics, I had the toys, and it was always kind of a weird, sad feeling that I kind of felt like I had experienced all of the M.A.S.K stories I was going to experience, the official ones, that is, that I was going to experience. The IDW comics hadn't come out yet. There was really nothing else. I had heard about these comics online, and I think I'd read about them on a website, and they said there was an 80-issue run of Fleetway Comics in the UK, which was, okay, that's cool. No other information available. Early on in the internet, there was very little information about these comics, and to this day, I feel like Scott Crawford's done a lot as well to help kind of tear down some of these barriers to entry for the UK comics. But it feels like there's a lot of people out there who just really don't know about them. And that's kind of what I want to change. I'm going to start putting some covers up over here. Just so you guys can see what the artwork looks like on these covers. As you can plainly see, they are gorgeous covers. The color really pops on them. They're really fun. They really kind of bring out the toys, the designs. I really can't speak enough of the art of these books. Some very talented people really did a lot to make these books look really good. So we're going to kind of jump into some of the UK comics. And the one thing that when you first look at these comics and when you hold one in your hand for the first time, so this is an issue of the UK comic. This is a US M.A.S.K issue, which is the standard size of a US M.A.S.K comic. They're huge. They are huge. So that's the first thing when I first saw them, I was truly surprised. And my first experiences with them is like I said before, I'd seen all the shows. I basically felt like I'd seen all the M.A.S.K material. I was visiting a friend in Dublin, Ireland, and I went to a comic shop there. One of my friends there, they knew of it, and they took me to this comic book shop, and I was looking around, and lo and behold, they had some back issues of M.A.S.K. So I bought a bunch of the back issues, paid a few euro each, I think, for them, and that evening, we went. Otherwise, we went around Dublin. We did some other things. I brought it back to my hotel room, and I was just dumbfounded. It was amazing to see that there were M.A.S.K stories that I had never seen before. These characters that I basically cared so much about and spent my childhood watching, playing with the toys of, and just having just this really great memory of. All of a sudden, it was a whole new world of M.A.S.K. So, after I got back to the United States over the years, I basically slowly amassed a collection of them. I would scour eBay and Facebook listings and just anywhere I can think to find these books. Most of it came from eBay. Some I bought in lots, some I bought single issues of, and it was great. I was really excited to get these comics. And it was just this wonderful feeling just to know that there's more M.A.S.K out there than kind of what I grew up with. If you're in the UK, you guys grew up with these books, and you guys had such great. You guys had a really great comic run over there. It was way more expansive than what we got in the US. I mean, it dwarfs the US series considerably. There's far more M.A.S.K UK comic stories than there's really of almost any other M.A.S.K media. I mean, there's 81 issues of the UK comic in front of me right here. There's 75 episodes of the cartoon. And that's not counting the special UK stuff the Eagle runs later on. So it's a ton of M.A.S.K media. So, as I said, there's 81 issues. The series ran through issue 1 through 80, but there was a preview issue that had an origin story of M.A.S.K. The origin story was reprinted later on in the first issue as well. But the preview issue also had some other stories in it, so if you're collecting these books, you want to get issue 1 through 80. They're all numbered on the cover. And you'll see in the issues you'll see the numbers on some of them. So issue 1 through 80, and then the preview issue. And you really want to get the preview issue because it does have material that's not in the other books. So something to keep an eye out for. And that's one of the things that I'm kind of making these videos for as well, is that so you guys kind of know what's out there. When I first came on the internet, there was no M.A.S.K comic blog. There was, a few M.A.S.K websites out there, and nobody really had any in-depth coverage of these books. So it was really kind of frustrating for me to kind of try and piece together what's out there. And I would just kind of buy the issues, I'd read through them, and pay special attention to like advertisements, and there's like, oh, there's a M.A.S.K summer special. Okay, now I gotta go find that issue. And I'm really hoping that the point of this video is to kind of take some of this guesswork out for the people who are trying to collect these books, and also to kind of pull back the curtain and show some of the people who really don't have any experience with these books kind of what they were all about. So if you look inside some of these issues, you'll see is basically they're mostly black and white comics. The covers are in color. There are color posters and there are color pages. But for the most part, it's a primarily black and white comic. That was kind of common in outside of the U.S. And I know there's manga in Japan. I know there's a lot of UK comics that are. Some of these comics were reprinted elsewhere in the world. I believe Germany with color runs. We'll look at some of that down the road, so don't worry. Um, so, but for the most part, if you're speaking English, you'll probably want to get the UK comics versions. And it's black and white. So if it's black and white and it bothers you, these might not be the books for you. I'm sorry. It is something to consider. Don't let that put you off on them, though. They are still some really great stories. The artwork is still amazing. I really, really can't point out how great the artwork is. The artwork, if you look at it, is very much based on the toy line. If you look at some of the stuff in the US comics, you can see elements of the cartoon in there. And there's just some elements of the cartoon. T-Bob definitely has his cartoon design for most of it. Sometimes he does have they do kind of change up his design to go with the toy. But for the most part, they kind of copied that from the cartoon. But for the most part, the designs are very much like the toys. They have a very toy feel to them. The designs are very, very close to what you would have gotten with the toys. So I feel like probably the source material they probably used when they probably created these was the toy line. Unfortunately, one of the side effects of them kind of focusing on the toy line is there is no Gloria Baker. Gloria is nowhere to be found. And that really is one of the few downsides I can really point out about these books. That it would have been nice had she been in here. Vanessa Warfield does appear later on, but only when the racing series characters start arriving in the book. So, had it stayed on into the split seconds, I would have liked to think that we would have got Gloria in here sooner or later, but they never got that far in the UK run. They basically covered the first series up to the racing and never went beyond the racing series. So, just something to keep in mind. There's some other general weirdness that, if you're only familiar with the cartoon, it comes off as weird. One of which is Hondo McClane. And I'm sure all of you will be more than happy to tell me that Hondo drives Firecracker, but in his first appearances in the UK comics, he was Dusty's co-pilot on Gator. Because apparently Firecracker wasn't available at the time, so, I'll use Hondo, so he rode around on Gator. It's kind of unusual, and it's one of those really sort of things that you really don't think about, and it was a multiple issue thing. It wasn't just like something that happened once. It happened often. And some of the materials do say he's Gator's co-driver, so it's something kind of bizarre in these books. So it's a very interesting, like I said, these stories are very interesting. And the one story I do want to talk to you guys about, and like I said, I will cover some more of these stories in depth later on, but there's still just infinitely too much for me ever to discuss here in one single video. I could talk for 3 hours on this subject and still not even cover most of these stories, and you guys really don't want to hear me talk on for 3 hours. The one really great story that they have in the story is we get a new origin of M.A.S.K. It is different than the origin we got. There's elements that are very similar, but there's a lot of elements that are different. The artwork is completely different than what's in the US, and I will have it up here. So going through it basically hits the same notes as the US storyline, which the US storyline was Matt and his brother Andy team up with Miles Mayhem to form an organization, which became M.A.S.K. Miles Mayhem betrays them, steals the plans to some of the Venom vehicles, and spawns Venom. Matt-Trakker, after Andy is killed, starts M.A.S.K. and the series as we know it takes off from there. So this series hits those same story notes. Miles Mayhem and Matt and Matt's brother form an organization, early M.A.S.K. Miles Mayhem betrays them, Matt's brother dies, and then Miles Mayhem forms Venom, Matt-Trakker forms M.A.S.K, and the story starts up as we know it. So the first element that's different is Andy is not here. There is no Andy. No Andy. We have Matt's new brother, who is Joe. So it's, if you want to accept somehow there's two Trakker brothers, but in the UK it's Joe, US it's Andy, so it's just something different. Joe, you'll see here, has dark hair, and he really doesn't say much. He doesn't really say anything. He basically shows up and he dies. He gets killed in the Venom ambush. We do get a few panels of the early M.A.S.K prototype vehicles, which I think is really cool, which is Switchblade, Jackhammer, Piranha, Rhino, and there's another green vehicle. It might be Jackhammer, but the artwork kind of is a little bit off on it, so something kind of interesting. And we can see an early M.A.S.K team very briefly, which looks to be guys in army fatigues, but there was a pre-M.A.S.K team that we never knew about, and I think that's cool. And to see the vehicles being tested together, I think is really cool. And most of the vehicles ended up being the Venom vehicles. Jackhammer, Piranha, Switchblade was the foundation of Venom. The only one they didn't seem to take was Rhino, so that's kind of cool. In that it's just something completely different than the comic story we got. So it hits the same story beats on the surface, but when you look at it, it's so much different than everything else we got in the US. So it's really cool that it's another M.A.S.K origin story. I feel like the cartoon never gave us an origin. And the US M.A.S.K comics, we had the mini comic that gave us an origin story, but when they did a regular DC Comics series, they kind of ignored it. So it's kind of cool to see that we got some semblance of an origin in M.A.S.K. And it's really cool. So when you look at the storylines for these, there's really very little inner story continuity. Once in a while, they do kind of play off each other, the stories, but for the most part, most stories are standalone. And if you're used to reading a US comic book, you'll basically get a piece of a story for the most part. And it'll basically almost be a standalone feature. With the UK comics, they're formatted very differently. So in any given issue of the UK comic, there's multiple stories going on. Sometimes you get a one-shot, but more often than not, there are different storylines going on in different issues. So you'll have 2 or 3 pages of one story, then 2 or 3 pages of another story, and 2 or 3 pages of a completely different story. And sometimes in one issue, you'll have part 4 of a story, part 1 of a new story, and part 5 of a different story. So it's kind of weird to read these through. So if you get a random issue, say issue number 37, you'll have different parts of different stories. So the sum total of the comics, I think, is worth more than them broken up. And like I said, there are some standalone stories. They do appear. But for the most part, it's these multi-part stories. So it's a little bit different. It's a little bit jarring a little bit to read them like this. And sometimes it's a little bit tough to read. So that's something to look out for. The series basically covers all sorts of the toy line. If it was in the first several series of the M.A.S.K toy line, it generally seemed to show up here. We also got to see things that weren't in the cartoon. We got to see some of the adventure packs, which makes me really happy. I really like the adventure packs. I loved them as a kid, and it was kind of cool to kind of finally see them getting their due. I know they appeared a little bit in the US comics, but like the cover with them, I'll have it here. It just kind of makes me really happy to see that comic cover. I mean, it's just great to see that Mask and Venom, these characters together. I mean, it's just great. We get to see Laser Command in action for the first time, and the story is kind of goofy. We see it's a crate fighting a truck, and it seems like they had some fun with it. So it's really cool that we never got to see that in the cartoon, but we got to see it here. The series does go into the racing series, but they didn't seem to hamstring it as much as the cartoon did. They seem not to focus as much on racing. There were some racing related stories, but for the most part, a lot of times they were treated as they're just more mass vehicles and new mask agents. So they kind of feels like they fit in better. So if you really like those racing vehicles, but you don't really like the racing episodes, this might be a good fit for you. So it's nice to see those vehicles in action in some different circumstances. Sometimes you saw vehicles together that were you never saw them together in the cartoon. You never saw, for example, Jackhammer and Iguana together. So that's kind of really neat. Um, Something I really liked. So the story, like I said, they never got into the Split Second series. The Eagle series never did either, which I feel like has always been a shame. I've never made any secret of the fact that I really was hoping I would find some Split Seconds fiction, because I would really have liked seeing some of these crazy toy designs, like see how the writers would have carried them out and used them. Seeing some of these vehicles in use, it would have been really cool. See things like the clones, but sadly, we just never got that in the UK. So, one other thing I want to point out to you, and if you do decide to start collecting these books, is the posters. There is some beautiful artwork on these posters. I really can't say enough that the artwork is very nice. It's very colorful. But the posters will be the bane of your existence, because they were stapled in the middle of the issue and they had comics printed on either side. So if the poster was removed, you lose part of the comic. So you always want to make sure, if you're looking for these books, to make sure the posters are always in there. I would usually try to ask and try and find out if they were complete. So it's something that it makes collecting these a little bit more difficult, but it's not insurmountable. I did manage to get a run with all the posters intact. It's possible. It was difficult, but possible. So it's just something you guys, I would recommend keeping an eye out for. Um, so we're kind of moving on to, like, if you want to collect these books, if you're in the U.S., it's not easy. I'd say it's probably way easier in the UK. There's probably local comic book stores. They were locally available there, so they exist there. I have never come across these for sale outside of the internet in the U.S. Most of the issues I think I bought, I fairly certain most, maybe even nearly all of them, came from the UK. I had to import them, and a lot of times I would pay more for the shipping to get it here than I actually did for the actual book. So if you're collecting these books, kind of keep an eye out on like Facebook groups and such for people selling like maybe a set of them to get multiple issue runs, because getting more issues means you can better maybe complete some of the storylines and kind of see more of the stories. So it's good in that regard, and you'd probably save a lot on shipping and buying these. That's basically where the difficulty is getting these comics in the United States, in my experience, lies. They're just not easy to find. You will have to hunt for them. And for some fans, that's okay. If that's not for you, it is it's perfectly okay. But if you do want to hunt them down, I would recommend starting with eBay and then Facebook groups. and just kind of keeping your eyes out for anybody who sells them. They do pop up, but it's not always frequent. Um, Even if you're not into buying the whole run, I would recommend just picking up an issue or two out there if you see one randomly for sale, for a decent, reasonable price, just to kind of see what it's about. The artwork is beautiful. The covers are great. And it's just generally good fun to kind of look at these books. I really, really like them. So I really would recommend kind of trying to track them down. So it looks like these issues were published in the UK. The first issue was from October of 1986, and it went through October of 1988. So it had a good 2-year run over there. They published them basically every 2 weeks, and then it looks like they went every week. So they got a ton of UK stories over there. The one thing also you might want to look out for is occasionally on some of the top covers, you'll see a family name printed on there. As I understand it, that was from the delivery service. You could either buy these like at a newsagent over there, or they would be delivered kind of with the, if I recall right, with your family newspaper. So that would have been really fun every week to get a new M.A.S.K story. I would have loved that as a kid. But, you know, I didn't live in the UK, I lived in the United States, so it's just something to keep in mind. So if you're looking for these issues very pristine, that's something you might run across. It's something very common. I know some of mine are marked that way. It doesn't particularly bother me too much. I think it's part of the charm. And a lot of my copies I kind of use for my research when I look up materials from the UK comics. Um, just trying to learn as much as I can about M.A.S.K. I have read every story, and the quality of stories, some are very good, some are okay, and some are kind of eh. Um, there's some that are kind of on the ridiculous side, some that are kind of okay, that's pretty cool, and some again they're just kind of okay. Um, it's really hard to point out like you know without going into every single story kind of what they are. Some stories will amount to um, Venom attacks and Mask or tries to steal something and Mask comes in and saves the day. So it's kind of neat in that regard that they're new Mask stories, but I'm not going to sit here and say that every story in these books is gold, but they're not bad either. So I mean, you have to accept them that they were written for kids, basically. Close to 30 years ago. So it's something that over 30 years ago these were written. So they're not going to be Shakespeare, but they're fun. They're fun and entertaining, and I really kind of want to, like I said, show what there is with these books. So, like I said, if you want to get the whole run of the first series of M.A.S.K, it'll be 81 issues. The paper starts out as a glossy kind of magazine print, which kind of feels like the comic book covers of like a US comic book. But then they went to kind of more of a newsprint like texture on some of the later issues. So I'm not sure why. I'm assuming it's a cost issue. So it's something just to keep an eye out for. It feels like the earlier issues are a little bit more durable. So just something to keep in mind. I just love these books. This artwork is just amazing. And like I said, it was great just to kind of learn that there's M.A.S.K out there. It's still out there. So I would recommend like at least everybody like try maybe track down one issue to kind of just see what it's like, to maybe just kind of get that feeling of something new M.A.S.K related that maybe you haven't encountered yet. And if you're in the UK and you love these books, I feel for you. I love them too. So they're great. I really enjoy them. So if, like I said, if you're gonna collect them, I would definitely recommend looking at on Facebook. The price of these vary so much, I'm not even going to try to give an estimate of what I would say. They're not particularly super rare in the UK, but they don't come up very much. They're uncommon when they come up, but they're not what I would call rare. So they do exist, so definitely try to track them down. So next time we're going to talk about the Eagle Run, which took on M.A.S.K after issue 80. Issue 80 did wrap up all the storylines ongoing at that point. And the next issue was they merged with another comic called Eagle in the UK. So it basically started a new line of stories. The artwork is very similar. The storytelling is very similar to this one. So if you really like the UK run of M.A.S.K and you've never read the Eagle one, you're in for a lot more of the same. So it's something we're going to talk about next time, though. So this has been Dave with the Boulder Hill Archive. Thanks for staying with the channel. I know Lisa, Darcy, and Bill, we're all still working hard here, so give us a like here, and I hope to see you guys all next time. Thanks a lot. Bye. Spectrum